what are a few tools that really allowed you to get to a space of true self-love? So when individuals came up to you and said, you are not the same Austin I knew, and I can't get on board with this Austin Yule. You were like, okay, and that sucks, but I honor you and I honor your decision and I honor who I am. And should that ever change, I'll be here for you.
All right, it's a great question. Thanks to you. Yeah, when we met in 2014, there wasn't a lot out there about that. I didn't know where to go, where to look. I've heard of meditation and things like that, but it wasn't about going within. It was about maintaining a state of being. Now, we could have a long conversation about how choosing love is maintaining a state of being, but neither here nor there right now. So we'll stick with the fact that it was more about calming, and it was about calming the mind, not even really about the heart, which is what you and I both know is really the depth of meditation. The mind is a tool to help us explore and understand purpose and the experience and the intention of the meditation. But the true depth of meditation occurs with here. And so I would say diving into that was one of the first tools, really understanding that, recognizing that when we take the time to seek to understand ourselves, ask ourselves the questions, honestly, it sounds kind of silly, but at first, one of the first things I did was ask myself questions that I would ask someone I was getting to know.
Exactly.
Because that's how disconnected I was from me, which is crazy. I'm the only one who's lived with myself, and I was so willing, and it was so easy for me to immediately want to know someone and understand them and connect with them. But why was it so difficult to ask those questions to myself? And so asking them, writing them down, meditating on them, and by meditating, I don't mean just sitting in a dark corner and, I mean actually, a meditation can be simply asking why. As you said, one of the great tools you gave me was asking why 7 times. You really want to dive into something, it is hard. Because when you get past number 3, you're just like, you attempt to start fishing for things like, I don't even know. And what a tool that is. It took weeks or months to take one simple thing and then drop it all the way down to 7 times of why. That's a great one. Really, really simple. It can fit in anything in your life, and it can really pull the best out of you. And then finally, I feel like the mirror technique. That one, in terms of physical, because I would like to, I know my answer is a little bit more all-encompassing, so I would like to take the time to kind of break down the how relative to physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. But to answer your question, the final tool was the mirror technique. I always enjoyed writing things on my mirror. I felt like I learned enough from that process of, whether it's inspiration or just something that I desired to become. I would write those on my mirror. I never once thought to write something like an I am statement, for example, or look deeply into my own eyes. Again, I knew that in order to create a connection, it was looking eye to eye. We've talked about this in multiple podcasts and videos and courses and all that fun stuff, but it's one that never loses its effect because it is so profound. When we look into our own eyes, the first 2 seconds, first 3 seconds, it's hard. It's only natural. Like, why am I looking at myself? You know, and so to get out of my own way, literally and figuratively,
Yeah.
to really look and get to the point where I could look at myself for 30 seconds, and then a minute, and then a couple minutes, and 5 minutes, without being, again, not crossing that line of narcissistic or egoic or conceited, but looking at myself, knowing that, well, you and I look at each other like that. Why can't I do that to myself? And the more I do that to myself, the greater that I can look into you.
Exactly. And there are so many things that come, I feel, from being able to look into your eyes, which in many ways causes you to look into your soul.
Yeah.
And we have had clients who, for the first several times that we would have them do this technique, they couldn't even look at themselves. They would cry and not be able to do it. So it sounds easier in many ways than it is. And maybe for some people it will be very easy, and that's a beautiful thing. But if it's not, it's okay too. Just don't give up. Keep going back to that mirror. Keep looking. Keep seeking to understand who you are really deep within there. Because there are so many layers to who we are beyond that physical aspect. And when we look into our own eyes, we begin to see that. And it can be unnerving, as you said. And so for many, that's why we avoid eye contact, right? Because that is a clear statement of vulnerability. And so to allow someone to look into your eyes like that, it can be scary that way too. So then we practice. It goes back to that self-love, right? If I love myself enough to be that vulnerable and transparent with myself, then it becomes easier to be that vulnerable and transparent with someone else.
Truth. And for me, with that practice, it was almost my first recognition of when we've heard in whether it's poems or stories about the eyes being kind of the windows to the soul. But it was the first time that it got me to not just think that the soul is something I have, but the soul is something I am.
Yeah.
And that's a complete shift in framework.
It's an experience of the soul.
Yes.
It truly can be.
Mm-hmm.
It can be. And you may feel things that you've not felt. I know I did. And I've had others who have. And so it's a beautiful way to truly connect with self.
Yes.
And so I feel like that one transcends. Yes, it's a physical thing. You begin to see things about yourself. And when I did the mirror technique, making eye contact, then looking at my whole self and choosing things I love about myself or creating I am statements, it was wonderful because then people would start feeding me the same compliments that I was feeding myself. It was like that power of attraction, right? Action, attraction, compensation.
Yes.
Laws of the universe in motion. But it was easier for me to receive them instead of going, oh, no, thank you, but no. Then I was like, oh, well, thank you. And it was just that perpetual cycle. So I got the physical, but I also got the emotional. Like my confidence in that area just started to grow. And then my mental would open up as well. So if it was, I really love how open and connected I am. You know, from a mental standpoint, I was so much stronger about being open and willing to receive and not take things personally, right? And then from a spiritual or a soul standpoint, it also opened me up because, as you said, I understood how expansive my soul was. And so it's, to me, is a technique that kind of embodies all of it.
Well said. Yeah. It's such a great starting point because, again, you can expand within it too. It's something that you could use for the rest of your life, as you're saying, and draw deeper and deeper into it at all levels of that.
Yeah. Grab little whiteboard markers and write on your mirror. There's just so many ways. And there's mirrors everywhere, right? So if you start to, as we talked about earlier in this, you start to go a little off, which we do, right? It's the human experience. We all get knocked off of our little happy path. But the moment that happens, it's like Clark Kent going into the phone booth, right? We can all get to a mirror and change into our I've got my super skill. I'm back. I see myself for who I truly am.